Good morning or good day, depending on where you are. Welcome to this webinar being hosted by the National Institute for Direct Instruction, NIFTY. My name is Brian Wickman. I'm based here in Eugene, Oregon, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today for this informative webinar about Project Follow-Through and its relevance today. I would like to start just by taking a moment to tell you a little bit about the National Institute for Direct Instruction, NIFTY. In the meantime, if you'd go ahead while you're giving me your undivided attention, divide it by also filling out the poll that we've put up here of getting to know you, so we know a little bit more about who you are and where you are, and we can share that with the rest of the group. The National Institute for Direct Instruction was founded over 25 years ago by Siegfried Engelmann, the senior developer of the direct instruction programs. Zig wanted to found an organization that's primary purpose is to show the potential for direct instruction when fully implemented to high fidelity with complete support would be able to, the results that would be able to be shown through utilization of the program. NIFTY provides services worldwide. We have had projects ranging all the way from Australia to Africa. So really, literally around the world. And we stand ready to serve you and your training needs. NIFTY does this through our website. We've got a very robust research base, as well as many, many resources to help educators. But again, we provide training through our National Direct Instruction Conference that we hold in Eugene, and look forward to perhaps being able to have some form of that, either virtually or live, face-to-face here in Eugene in July. We also, as I said before, are eager to work with schools to fully implement the direct instruction programs. You can contact us at info@nifty.org and get more information. So before we start our webinar today, I'd like to just introduce our host, our presenter, which is Bonnie Grossen. Bonnie is we'll say veteran direct instruction teacher, consultant, and researcher. Bonnie started her career with direct instruction I believe in middle school in Idaho, teaching hard to teach kids. She then got her master's and doctorate at the University of Oregon, and has launched many implementations, again, worldwide, doing a stint in South Africa for a while, as well as working in, I believe, the American Samoa, and all points in between. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Bonnie Grossen. And again, I thank you for your time here today. Bonnie, you want to take it away?
Okay, thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to talk with all of you about Project Follow-Through today. And I'm grateful for Brian and Tamara for all the help they've given me in getting this webinar organized. And we started out with a poll to get to know where you're from. And it looks like we have quite a number of people from, we have people from Europe now, and the United Kingdom and Canada, as well as a bunch from America. And I hope I can see the next question. Well, share the results. Brian was going to do this. There the results are so far. And I don't know how to get to the next question.
So Bonnie, this is Tamara. Just go ahead and scroll. Go ahead and scroll through this poll, and you'll see the next.
There we go. Yes, good. Thank you for the tip. That's why I have Brian and Tamara. How much do you know about direct instruction? One person has never used it, but nobody says they know nothing about it. That's good. Somebody knows about the principles and the design methods, a couple people. And some have taught it for a year or less, and many have taught it. 70% have taught it for more than a year. And have you heard of Project Follow-Through? I've heard a little. Well, and quite a few have heard a lot. So I've got some experts here to help me. 40% have heard a lot. Well, if you know something, you can use the question and answer box to help me out. Now I'm done with the poll, I think. Okay. Yes. So I have taught and implemented and authored direct instruction programs for 45 years. Brian was quite thorough. I've taught elementary school and high school, and I worked a lot in California implementing an intervention model with using direct instruction in middle schools. I've been in probably over 1,000 middle schools. So I'm kind of old and tired, but I still get excited talking about follow through and some of the results we've achieved. Follow through began in 1966 and was funded through 1995. So it was a very long and expensive study. It cost over $1 billion and involved about 750,000 children and 180 school districts. Those numbers varied depending on which of those years you're looking or how you're summarizing, but generally that's true. And a comprehensive evaluation was published in 1977. Now, why is an evaluation that old still relevant today? Well, I'll say just as the, I should go forward here. There we are. Just as the polio vaccine was useful for us and it was discovered in 1956, we cured polio, but if we ever have a recurrence of polio again, we know how to cure it. And that research is still relevant today. But as you will see, we didn't use the findings of Project Follow Through to cure the epidemic of inequality in education when we could have. Today, I'm going to have a few polls. If I get my stuff going here, I hope to be able to interact with you with polls and give you opportunities to ask questions. And you can also make comments in the questions. And at certain points, we'll stop and look at those questions. The topics we'll cover today are the goals and origins of Project Follow Through, the scope and the structure of the project, the results and the implications of the findings, the critique and the lack of dissemination, and its significance today. Follow Through began with the Equal Opportunity Act that was funded as part of Johnson's War on Poverty in 1964. Folks had noticed that low academic performance was associated with poverty, and people hypothesized that if academic performance could be raised in low wealth neighborhoods, then those children would have more opportunities. They could get better paying jobs and would break the cycle of poverty. So the purpose of the Economic Opportunity Act was to fund compensatory education, plus give more money to schools and serving high poverty neighborhoods, particularly in early education and especially in preschool. So Head Start was funded first in 1965, hoping that that would be a big solution, getting kids started early, giving them a head start to start school. An evaluation of the effects of, an evaluation found that Head Start results were not transferring to the elementary school. So they decided they needed to fund the elementary school. The fact is there was never an evaluation that showed Head Start got any results to transfer to elementary school. But that aside, Congress did fund Project Follow Through, which was to extend follow through into the primary grades. Initially, the goal of follow through funding was to provide compensatory education, as I said, in grades K or 1 through grade 3. But teachers needed professional development and materials as well as funding for the materials and the training. So the problem of what professional development and materials should be used was solved by inviting sponsors to apply to be a model for follow through. And money was involved, so education leaders of all sorts applied to be sponsors. Models were reviewed, some were rejected, others were added later with political pressure, and with political pressure they were accepted. Colleges of education, regional labs, State's Department of Ed were the main applicants, and in the end, 22 models were accepted. Then the amount budgeted ended up smaller than hoped for. How often does that happen? So not all needy schools could be served. So in order to justify more funding or hope to get more funding so all schools could be served, the Education Department decided to conduct an evaluation of the performance of the schools receiving the funds to prove that this was worthwhile. Get great results, you'll get more funding. So the simple concept of compensatory education became proving how well compensatory education works. And Zig, the developer of DI, knew that his model would work better than the others and was very excited that follow-through is now a horse race. I remember him telling me that. And he would win and show the world. So he was excited now. So the participants in follow-through were 180 low-income communities, 750,000 children, and 22 models of instruction. The final evaluation occurred in 1975, 1976, was published in 1977. And this is 8 or 9 years after the models started in their schools. So sponsors had plenty of time to perfect their implementation before evaluation. That's always one of the criticisms when something doesn't work, is that, oh, we didn't have enough time. If we could have just had more time to work with those teachers, we could have gotten them up to speed. Well, that's not an excuse they can use now. And in any study, you apply rules to the data for eliminating scores that don't qualify. For example, they wanted children who had been through the model from K to 3rd grade or 1st grade to 3rd grade, depending on what the school offered. They wanted kids who had been in the program the whole time. So first thing you have to do is eliminate the scores of kids who have not been in attendance at that school for the whole time. So that reduces your data by quite a bit. And then you eliminate models that fizzled after 10 years. And in the big evaluation, they finally ended up with 9 models. Those models had more than 3 sites. And these models were divided into 3 categories that had 3 types of focus. The first group of models, 3 models, had a focus on academic knowledge. The second group had a focus on problem solving. This is a constructivist approach. And then the third group focused on building kids' self-esteem. And the evaluation evaluated them in those categories. All models were expected to be worthwhile and successful. So the first group of models that had an academic focus, they were called basic skills by the researchers. The apt associates did the research. They labeled this group basic skills. And their goal was to directly teach fundamental skills in reading, arithmetic, spelling, and language. The direct instruction model, nowadays we call it Big D, Big I, is different from little d, little I. And a lot of people think of direct instruction as just anything teacher directed. I think a better name for direct instruction would have been engineered instruction, because direct instruction is highly engineered. And then the programs used in the direct instruction model were called DISSTAR, Direct Instruction System for Teaching and Remediation. A second model in this category was the behavior analysis model, which I'm going to call behaviorism as we look at these data, because this model was based on the theories of behaviorism and emphasized on-task behavior and getting kids to behave as you want them to. They used token economy and all kinds of reinforcers. And for the behaviorists, the curriculum was not important. They let the schools choose, and most schools choose to use Sullivan program phonics. Some schools chose DISSTAR. So there was a little bit of contamination, you might say, there. And the third model was the language development model, which was bilingual education. So I'll call it bilingual education. We understand what that is better. And it was for Spanish-speaking children, and the teaching procedures were not specified. Its goal was to be bilingual, teach kids bilingually in both Spanish and English. The second group of programs had a focus on problem solving. The apt associates called this group the cognitive conceptual group. Their goal is to develop skills for learning to learn. The first model listed here is the Florida Parent Education Model. And the curriculum varied. It didn't specify. Curriculum is not important for a lot of these other models. Parents were trained as aides. 2 parents were aides half-time in a class. And then those 2 parents trained other parents to work with the children at home. And they emphasized individualized instruction. And the second one in this group was the TEAM model, the Tucson Early Education Model, which used the language experience approach that we called whole language in the 90s, and is primarily a holistic approach, holistic math also, which we call constructivist. The constructivist theory underlies this model. Children's interests determine the curriculum. And then the third one was the high scope model. The high scope model by David Weichert. And we've called this model developmentally appropriate practices. They managed to harness that name, label their specific program that way in the 90s. And I think it's still popular with the early education people to use that terminology. Children schedule their own activities, and the teachers are not to be the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. Teachers work as catalysts, and children pursue natural, stimulating activities. They choose their activities, and both the team model and the high scope model are very constructivist. And the Florida Parent Education Model was also constructivist in that students did a lot of projects. The third group were the affective cognitive group. This group focused on building self-esteem. The first model there was called responsive education from the Far West Lab. And that model had the theory that with self-esteem and appropriate learning environments, learning would happen. And the instruction was self-paced, no pressure. And problem solving was also an emphasis, but first priority was on self-esteem. And then kids would be able to solve problems. And then the Bank Street model, its goal was to develop the children's self-image, inspire creativity, teach them coping skills, teach them to use language to express their ideas. And no curriculum was used. No textbooks, no lesson plans were required at all. And open education is the last model. This one was based on the British Infant School. Involved very flexible grouping of students based on student choice. They chose their activities. It stressed a stimulating environment with many interest areas for children to choose from, flexible schedule with children initiating and terminating their own activities, and emphasized self-respect, imagination, and openness to change. Those were the 3 models that were what had the focus of building self-esteem. Now we'll take some questions, if there are any, from the field.
Well, Bonnie, we don't have any just yet, but folks, yes, I'd like to encourage you to type your questions that you may have. There will be intermittent breaks such as this for you to have the chance to ask your individual questions, and Bonnie will address them. And also, there have been a couple of questions that have come across asking about if this is going to be recorded and if we will get access to the PowerPoints. And the answer to both is yes. I did neglect to say when we started that I will be sending you an email with links to those a bit after this webinar. So if there did not appear at this time to be any questions, oh wait, how is the overlap with DISTAR in the applied behavior analysis and DI addressed? You did say that those behaviorist sites had their choice.
They had a choice.
Yeah.
Yes. Some of them chose DISTAR. Well, it wasn't addressed. People thought curriculum wasn't important. Zig knew that the behaviorist sites picked DISTAR, but the apt report ignored that fact. But you can always hypothesize about why the scores came out the way they did when we look at the scores.
Okay.
Fact to know.
Great. Thanks, Mitzi, for that question. And again, we encourage folks to, or Sarah, we encourage you to continue to ask your questions, and we will, again, intermittently break and answer them. So I'll turn it back over to you, Bonnie.
Yes, thank you. Well, there might be more questions as we get into the next part, the more.
Absolutely.
The difficult. So this is very interesting, I think, that the parents selected the model for each community. The Equal Opportunity Act required extensive community involvement and formed parent action committees. And those committees had to be very much involved in everything that had to do with follow through. So all the sites, all the models had a very active and involved parent community. Starting with, the parents chose the model that the school got to pick. Can you imagine? And they had big exhibitions where the model sponsors would come and pitch their model to people, parents. Administrators were usually, this Zig told me, administrators were usually walking along with the parent committee, holding them by the elbow, trying to influence their decisions. And if the administrators just made the choices for the model the school would take, or the district would take, probably direct instruction would not have been chosen at all. But with parents making the choices, DI was one of the two most popular models chosen for follow through. DI and the team model both had 20 sites each. But with parents making the choices, then these models were not planned to be distributed across geographic areas, and ethnicity was uncontrolled. Some schools had no kindergarten and others had a first grade. And in the annual evaluations that occurred initially, they were evaluating every year, the models, people weren't doing very well. The scores were not very good. And so this became a criticism that these sites, comparing these sites is not fair. There's not a fair comparison because there was no random assignment. Parents picked the sites. So you end up with a site the parent picked, and you might have got a bad site, or you might have got somebody else might have got a better site. So this became a problem that the evaluation wasn't fair, because of the assignment, and maybe other reasons too. But so they decided to do a comprehensive evaluation. This is the one we're talking about, the big one in 1975, 76, published in 77. And they had systematically varied education in these different sites by these different models. And they decided to identify comparison groups, a comparison group for each site that was matched by ethnicity, geographic location, income level, matched on all kinds of variables. And so every model, every follow-through site had a comparison group. And it was a difficult task, but the apt reports that they found the comparison groups were quite equivalent to their partner follow-through group. Now I want to I'll ask you a question. What kind of instruction was in these comparison groups? These are just the regular run-of-the-mill high poverty schools that don't have any follow-through model. They're doing what they do every year, every day, every minute. These are probably what we would call teacher-directed instruction. Isn't that what people assume happens in those regular schools that didn't do very well. Direct instruction, little d, little I. Anyway, the description of what happened in those comparison schools is not as detailed as what happened in the follow-through schools, but that's an interesting thing to contemplate. What were these comparison schools doing? Little d, little I. In spite of all those weaknesses that the sponsors complained about, there were a lot of strengths. The sponsors were directly funded to do the training. They had to walk their talk. Especially a lot of these constructivists will say, you know, teachers just don't do it right. We told them how to do it. We trained them, but they're not smart enough to figure it out. And, you know, it's not our fault. Our theory still works. But here, they were funded. They were given lots of money to show and years to show that they could get their schools and their teachers to do what they thought was the best kind of instruction. Schools also received funding. They received $650 a pupil, and another source says figured $750 a pupil. I suppose it depends on which year you were looking at. And all of the models, all the schools received the same measures. Uniform measures were used for everybody. That's, of course, taken for granted, but no model could complain that there were not enough resources. There were lots of resources. The measures that were given were a problem-solving measure called Raven's Colored Progressive Matrices. These emphasize patterns and figuring out all kinds of weird shapes, what kind of pattern will fit. The sponsors got to help in selecting measures too. And one model, I can't remember which one, actually did a lot of this kind of activity. But the theory of the colored progressive matrices is you have to have problems. If you want to test whether kids can solve problems, you got to have problems they've never seen before. So if you pick a problem that could be something you've run into, you might have some kids who actually have seen that problem and solved it before. So you have to have unique and unusual problems to make sure that these are new. So these are just kind of weird patterns that nobody would ever have seen before, except that one model did emphasize doing those sorts of patterns. And the Cooper-Smith self-esteem inventory, an intellectual achievement responsibility scale for testing self-esteem, and then the Metropolitan Achievement Test. The whole battery, which is huge, was mainly for academic skills, although the math problem solving was used as a problem solving measure, and the reading comprehension was used as a problem solving measure. So they really did take just the basic skills for the basic skills measures, and some of the measures went under the category of problem solving. Oops. Okay, now we have our measures. I'm going to ask you to take another poll. Is Tamara O'Brien going to help me launch this? Okay, there we go. See what your beliefs are and how they jive with the follow-through sponsors.
Great, and I'm just going to jump in here one more time and remind our folks who are attending with us to scroll down. There are 4 questions, so once you answer the first one, go ahead and scroll down and you'll get question 2, 3, 4, and 4.
Don't be scared. There we go. Some people are answering.
Looks like our folks are thinking deep and hard about their responses.
You're not going to get a score. You won't fail.
Now the numbers are starting to come in.
Oh, we've got some good DI people out there, I can see. They know the right answers.
Yeah, let's give it about 15 more seconds. It looks like we're getting up there. We got 70% response rate right now. Oh, climbing up there. Okay. So it's been 2 minutes, so why don't we, Tamara, end that and look at what those results are.
Okay. Are they looking at those results?
Are we sharing those?
Are we sharing those?
In just a second. There we go.
There we go.
Yes, question 1. Everybody thought systematic explicit instruction is best. Well, aren't you just so well informed? And question 2, teachers can be superior reading from a script. One person disagreed. That's good. Others, typically people would disagree. So we have a very direct instruction friendly audience. And find the next number 3. Tests, bias. Where is the bias? 19% say that the test is culturally biased, and 19%, I'll write this down. And 81% say the instruction was culturally biased. And which is more true? Students who experience success are motivated.
I'd say that response to the third question, Bonnie, not to interrupt too much, it's an interesting mix of responses on the third, whether it's the test or the instruction.
Right. Well, I don't want to give the answer yet. We're going to look at the data and review these results.
Very good.
In terms of what the follow-through data would indicate. So, I'm not going to say what's right or wrong yet.
We don't want to give a spoiler. Go ahead.
No spoiler. But number 4, which is more true? Students who experience success are motivated. Yes. Students who are motivated to learn will, is there an end to that question? Will learn. Maybe that question was a little Yeah. Anyway, I guess we will move on from there. I think, stop sharing. Thank you for your, can we turn that off? We share?
It is, Bonnie. You just have to close your window now.
Okay, I closed my window.
There you go.
Now we're getting into the fun part, the results. For each follow-through group, we had 2 comparisons. For each follow-through group, a non-follow-through equivalent comparison group was selected. And then we also have standardized scores, which allow us to compare to national norms, what middle class or what American kids on average accomplish. And generally American kids on average accomplish at the 50th percentile. These schools typically perform at the 20th percentile. So in the final data set, there were 17 models finally evaluated in 1975-76, and there were 2 cohorts, 2 years. Each cohort had 2 streams. One stream started in K and ended in grade 3, the same time as another stream that started in grade 1, ended in grade 3. And the 9 models again were there, and they all had more than 3 sites in the final evaluation. And that evaluation, after they eliminated all the data for the grade 3, had 15,741 children. That is a lot of kids. Even, of course, there were many more, but they had to eliminate them for the ones that weren't there all 3 or 4 years and so forth. But this is a huge number that remains with those high levels of strict criteria. So in the comparisons, the follow-through model was compared to the comparison group. So there was a local comparison, that is this site with its equivalent comparison group. And then there was a pooled comparison where all the comparison groups were averaged together. For each comparison, the difference was counted as a difference if it was both statistically and educationally significant. To be statistically significant, the difference had to be greater than 5%. That is, the probability that the difference occurred by chance is less than 5% statistically. And to be educationally significant, the difference had to be greater than a quarter standard deviation. So how does that work? Let's look at that. Let's say we have 100 comparisons of performance on the problem-solving scales for a model. That would be, let's say you have 20 sites and you have 20 follow-through sites and 20 comparisons groups. So that's 20 comparisons. And then you have 5 subscales for problem solving. That would be 5 of each of those. So that's 5 times 20 is 100. Well, for our hypothetical, I picked 100 because it'll be easy for us to figure the percent, since this is going to be the denominator in our percent fraction. Now, let's say 25 comparisons did not meet the criteria of statistically or educationally significant, so they didn't count. And of the 115 comparisons were negative. They favored the comparison school. Not a result we're looking for. And let's say 60 comparisons were positive. They favored the follow-through school. What would be the final net percent of significant outcomes? You subtract 15, the negatives, from the positive 60, and you get 45. So 45 would be our net percentage of outcomes. So here's the big finding from follow-through. The 3 categories of measures were grouped all together, the subscales. There are over 2,000 comparisons represented here. The blue represents problem solving. The green, academic measures are the blue, sorry. Green are the problem solving measures, and self-esteem is in red. And you can see that in the academic area, the direct instruction model had 30% net positive outcomes in the comparisons, and about 35% in problem solving, and about 29% positive in self-esteem. Now look at the other models. Only 2 other models had any positive outcomes for academics: the behaviorism model and the parent education model. And those 2 models also had positive outcomes for self-esteem. And in addition, the bilingual model had a positive outcome for self-esteem. And the Bank Street had a positive model for problem solving. That's probably the one that practiced those progressive matrices as part of their curriculum. But this is devastating. And the 3 models on the left are the academic models. They all got positive self-esteem scores. The 3 models on the right, which focused on self-esteem, all had negative self-esteem scores. For focusing on self-esteem, their children had lower self-esteem than the children in the comparison groups. And their academics were much worse. And then in the middle, the problem-solving group, none of those models got any positive results for problem solving. And these are the comparisons that were expected to make all the models look good and show that investing in compensatory education was worthwhile. This was a disaster. Well, let's get a few questions from the field, I guess, now. See if there are any about that chart, since it's a lot of information. And if there are none, we'll go on.
Well, we do have one question, and wasn't ABA also a model, or is that the behaviorism label?
That's the behaviorism label, yes.
Yeah.
I called it behaviorism just because we'll understand that term these days better than ABA, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and going back to the behaviorism model, well, they got some positive results for academics. Maybe that was a little bit of the distar in there, I don't know. And parent education, you remember, emphasized individualized work with a lot of parent involvement. So
Yeah, so we don't have any more questions just yet, but now, folks, this is where it gets really exciting. So,
well, we have more results, and we can
Yeah.
ask some questions.
yeah, you bet. We'll continue.
Okay. On the apt report, as anyone would conclude, probably looking at those results, the official finding was no problem-solving model got positive results on problem solving. Models that focused on self-esteem had negative effects on self-esteem. And the academic models had positive effects on self-esteem, and they didn't focus on self-esteem. And so the apt associates concluded self-esteem is an outcome, not a cause of academic success. And I think we see that when we teach direct instruction. We emphasize, well, one thing we always say is, if a problem is a little bit challenging, we say, oh, this is really hard, I don't think you can do it. Whereas I hear teachers a lot of times when they want to try to encourage a kid, oh, this is easy, you can do it. And the kid can't do it. And it's like, oh man, am I dumb? I can't do that. There are just a lot of subtle things that go into self-esteem. But telling a kid he's smart, I mean, I don't know how you tell a student they're smart if they can't do the work you're giving them. You say, well, you're not very good at math, but you're sure good at making paper airplanes, Johnny. Anyway, it's difficult. I think the message here is it's difficult to just teach self-esteem without giving kids some genuine success. So let's look at our poll questions. From those results, we know that answer B would be clearly indicated by the results of the follow-through study, that the teacher who presented systematic explicit instruction from proven and tested lesson plans was more effective than all those teachers using authentic experiences and responding creatively to the child. And the second question, teachers who teach by reading a script can be superior teachers. They can be superior teachers. Yes, the follow-through direct instruction teachers were superior, and they were all following a script. They were reading a script. In fact, teachers from some of those areas later, I remember one saying when somebody was presenting this new model of authentic, whatever, constructivists were there trying to persuade these teachers to try something new and throw their DI away. And one teacher sat there with her arm crossed. And she says, all I know is I just read the blue words, and the kids say the black words, and it works. I'm not saying it's that simple. Teachers do have to correct and respond, and definitely it's much more effective with smart teachers, and they're engaged and know where they're going with the instruction, but teachers following a script can be superior. And the main thing the script accomplishes is to get all teachers to be effective. Helps all teachers to know what to do and how to do it. The second comparison, we'll go to the other two questions in a minute, was to national norms using the norm referenced Metropolitan Achievement Test. And here are just the reading scores to look at. So you get used to this graph. This is the actual average percentile score in the total reading battery. And the direct instruction kids in third grade averaged the 42nd percentile. And the 20th percentile there is the axis rather than zero, because the 20th percentile is what these schools would normally achieve in those low-income neighborhoods. The 20th percentile is their normal achievement level. So that would be what would be expected of these follow-through schools. And now these are just the follow-through models. And you see the behaviorist model did get a pretty high score in reading using the two groups, two sites used DISSTAR. And then others got some positive results for reading also. And some got worse results than the comparison schools. The bilingual model, for example, got worse results. But the bilingual model was selected by Spanish-speaking communities. So they had largely Spanish-speaking children, and that could have been a confounding factor for their results. Now, here are all the results: reading, math, spelling, and language from the Metropolitan Achievement Test. And you can see that in math, spelling, and language, the direct instruction group achieved approximately the 50th percentile. And that, remember, is the goal of the whole Economic Opportunity Act, to help these children become, close the gap with middle class or average Americans, to help them become average. The 50th percentile was our glory hole, our goal. And the direct instruction model pretty much achieved that goal. The behaviorism model did very well with spelling. And but many of the models, in math particularly, went below the 20th percentile. Yes, okay. So what do these results mean for our question 3? This is one where we had some variation. Tests can be culturally biased, but if we know that with Black and brown children, we can get them to achieve at the 50th percentile with an instructional model, a particular instructional model, then if we don't use that instructional model and we don't get those scores, we can't blame the test. Those kids in the direct instruction model achieved virtually the 50th percentile. Instruction that doesn't achieve the 50th percentile is culturally biased, would be my argument. And then which is more true? Students who experience success are motivated to learn, or students who are motivated to learn will experience success? I'm not sure your question had all those words in it, but this is like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And both are probably true, but the one that we seem to find to be most true is success. Academic success will help motivate kids to learn, and those kids will then learn more and experience more success. So more findings from the follow-through data. The difference between the highest direct instruction group and the lowest other model was 3.6 standard deviations. Remember, a quarter standard deviation is what we needed. That's all we needed to have an educationally significant difference. 3.6 standard deviations is unheard of. It is so gigantic. That means that the highest kid performing in the lowest model did not do as well as the lowest kid in the direct instruction model. There is no overlap at all. There is air between those groups. And APT also concluded that most models resulted in lower scores than regular education. Oh dear. Here's another chart. This shows, again, our significant outcomes, our net percentages of significant outcomes using the comparison schools. So we're comparing again to our equivalent comparison groups. And these are the subscales of the math battery of the Metropolitan Achievement Test, total math and 3 subscales. And on those subscales, you see the DI model did very well with computation and problem solving, concepts. A lot of that's vocabulary. So I know DI doesn't always teach a lot of they have a different way of teaching the concepts. And the total math score is extraordinarily high, especially compared to the other groups in math. And the problem solving, well, anyway, this is to put the comparison groups, which to make a fair comparison rather than comparing to norms. And even with that comparison, these groups, these models don't show up very well for effects. The comparison groups did better most of the time. Now, any more questions?
Yeah, we've got a really good one here. Gentlemen, says, I've disseminated the results of Project Follow Through and was told that the statistical methodology used to get these results make them flawed. Can you speak to that, Bonnie?
Oh, yes. Well, we're going to get more into that. Yes, well, the statistical methods used made them flawed. Well, they used a lot of covariates for those comparison schools, trying to make the comparisons fair. And the apt associates would say they were fair. But as we'll get to the critiques here in a minute.
Okay, so
they wanted to do
a teaser.
Yeah, a bit of a teaser, yes.
There's a bit of a teaser, Stephen, and stay tuned for more information. Again, folks, we welcome your questions and would like to
yes, we welcome your questions.
Yeah, all right, well,
Of course, when you get those horrible results, you're going to say something is wrong with the evaluation. It has to be the evaluation that has a problem, not the fact that there's any truth to what they're finding there. That would be the excuse.
We have another.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, we have another question coming in. Can you elaborate on how instructional models that are inadequately explicit can be culturally biased against children who have experienced more trauma or adverse childhood experiences, largely due to poverty, racism, and other factors? So
how those models are culturally biased. The instruction is culturally biased because we do have a proven model that shows you can equalize those academic differences, problem-solving differences, self-esteem differences. And when we choose not to use that, then we're using an instructional model that is culturally biased against those results.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Does that make sense, Brian? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Bill, the person asked the question, do you have a follow-up to that? Oh, Bonnie, here's another question coming in. The original study was K3. Was there any replication with older students or even adults, especially those in historically marginalized communities? So it'd be like, was there a follow through?
Yes. Well, we're going to get to those results here too.
Oh, that's true. There were some follow-up. Schweinhart and Weichart did their stuff. We'll probably get to that later.
Yeah, I didn't go into that. We could be here till noon. But I did look at the follow-up.
Okay, we'll touch on that.
Yes, okay, I'll touch on Weichart too. Weichhart's follow-up, yes. So additional findings from the follow-through study. No large-scale evaluation was done again. They didn't want another evaluation. But sponsors were funded to do their own research on their models and look more into how to make them more effective and see if they could get their own data. The direct instruction sponsor findings, Becker mainly, found that the kindergarten, the cohort that started in kindergarten would score higher than the group that started in grade 1 and grade 3. So starting in kindergarten got better results than waiting and starting in grade 1. That's logical. Low IQ children gained 17 IQ points. And if they were in kindergarten, they gained 17 IQ points from kindergarten to 3rd grade. And in 1st grade, they gained an average of 9.2 points. 17 points is huge. That's like the IQ score of 83 to the average score of 100. And 83 in those days was in what we call the mental retardation range. And 100 was average. That would move you from MR to average. Well, we don't use those terms anymore. And we've changed the definition of MR to be 2 standard deviations below the mean instead of 1. But in those days, that would have 17 points is more than a standard deviation, so it's very significant. High IQ kids stayed high IQ. They didn't get dumbed down by working with this star. And low IQ children made the same academic gains as high IQ children. So it seems like direct instruction closed the IQ gap. Well, now people kind of poo-poo IQ scores because they were thought to be stable, and this proves actually they're not that stable. But take that for what you will. I think it's interesting. And the high school follow-up, actually Gerson did a lot of this work. There were 5 districts that were followed up. DI kids into high school, these original follow-through kids went into high school. And they found that the direct instruction students scored better than comparison sample in academics in 5 of those sites, significantly better. And they had better attendance, significantly better in 3 of those sites. And they were significantly more often accepted to college in 2 of those sites, but actually twice as many DI kids were accepted to college as the expected rate. This has to do with statistical significance. If you have a small sample, it's hard to get statistical significance. And the DI students were less likely to fail, that is, be held back. They had a reduced retention in 3 of the sites. And then I didn't put a slide in here about David Weichert's follow-up of high scope and direct instruction preschool kids. But that was actually, he was arguing that direct instruction was bad for preschool kids. Follow through is kindergarten to 3rd grade. And it would take a long time to go into his studies, but he evaluated his model compared to DI and claims to have found the kids years later and claims that makes all sorts of claims that are not really supported by the data. There are critiques you can find of that if you're interested in Weichert's review, but he was, I would say, very angry with the direct instruction model and determined to show his model was more effective, or that DI was damaging to the self-esteem and egos of those kids. Not true. The direct instruction model sustained 12 of those districts out of 12 were rated exemplary in 1980 to 81. The districts were very large: New York, San Diego, Washington, D.C. They included middle-sized districts: Flint, Michigan, Dayton, Ohio, East St. Louis, Illinois; rural Black districts: Williamsburg, South Carolina; Mexican American, these would be Spanish-speaking, Uvalde, Texas; East Las Vegas, Nevada; and Native American district in Cherokee, North Carolina. And more findings: implementation fidelity predicts classroom achievement. They did find initial teacher reaction as negative in the follow-through sites. You have to keep in mind that the parents chose the model. It wasn't like the sponsors pitched to the staff or to the administration and sold them on it before they implemented. Parents picked it and then it was dumped on them. So it's sort of reasonable that the initial teacher reaction was negative. But they found at the end of the 2nd year, teachers strongly supported DI. They'd been seeing kids learn and found the program was effective, made them successful teachers. And more than half of the teachers found the in-class coaching part of the direct instruction model the most positive feature. They liked to be coached and visited and supported. Then back to the dissemination and the critique and what happened with the results of follow-through. Well, even before the results were published, the Ford Foundation funded a group of researchers led by Glass to write a critique of the evaluation. And in that critique, they argued that the scientific method should not be used in education. Well, I don't know, we have to think about that. I have a little more that might explain that. They also said that education or models, methods needed to use an ethnographic case study approach. Look at one child or 2 children in a class, see how they learn. I've read many of those studies. For example, a constructivist teacher teaching math and doing this elaborate authentic problem, and then it describes 2 kids who learned and did well with that instruction. But what happened to the rest of the class is not elaborated on in that report, research report. That's case study research. And number 3, they said in writing that the follow-through audience, or the audience for the follow-through research, is an audience of teachers for whom research is irrelevant. And number 4, they were adamant that no practice should be adopted as a national policy. And as a result of those findings, we can't say that direct instruction is the only thing that could ever work. We only had one model that used engineered instruction. There could be many other models of engineered instruction that could work, but that would be the area we'd look in, because we do know that the naturalistic constructivist approaches that emphasize open-endedness and stimulating problems, that those approaches got worse results on the whole than teachers in those high poverty neighborhoods just doing what feels right and what they think of as teaching with no help at all. Those should be rejected. In any kind of scientific study, when we find something, we generally rule out what doesn't work, and we can still explore other options that might work, but the category of constructivist approaches is definitely detrimental to Black and brown children and low wealth neighborhoods. So as far as scientific, we should not use the scientific method. I think this speaks to that. The argument is that the most important outcomes can't be measured, hence you can't use a scientific approach. Most important outcomes can't be measured. But the things that you can measure, this assumes that those unmeasured important outcomes go in the opposite direction of what you measure. That, that you're going to be competent in something unmeasured at the same time that you are having worse effects, showing more negative effects than everything you can measure. And they claim that the Metropolitan Achievement Test favors rote learning, mostly because it's multiple choice. Now, there's much of this that people will kind of inherently agree with, but I want you to think a minute about evaluating an individual versus evaluating a program. If you have an individual you're trying to evaluate and you give them a fractions problem, 1/2 plus 1/4 equals something, and that individual A gets the problem wrong or doesn't get the right answer, and individual B gets the right answer. You don't know, for those two students could be quite equivalent. You need to give them a lot of items to see what student A knows and what student B knows. That might just be kind of a fluke that student didn't know that problem. But now let's think about a whole class, a whole school of grade 3. And you give that problem 1/2 plus 1/4 to the whole school of grade 3 in school A. And you give that same problem to the whole school, school B. And school A, every single student gets that problem right. And in school B, every single student misses that problem. Now, from that one problem, you know you can make you have more probability of guessing that the school A has a better math program than school B, just from that one problem. You might want to get some more items, but just because all those students could not do that one problem in school B, and all of them could do it in school A, you have a lot of information about the program. Now just do a few more problems and you can evaluate the effectiveness of an instructional program much more easily than you can evaluate an individual. And program evaluation is really what we should be about, evaluating how well we're teaching. And that's my opinion. And but because we need to get the instruction right before we start holding individual kids accountable. If we look at just the cost per pupil, multiple choice tests for program evaluation can be quite effective and cheap and reliable. Look at the reliability score for the multiple choice test way up there in the edge. You can hardly see it up in the upper corner. It's like 88 to 95% reliable, and so cheap, it's almost off the scale. And if you look at writing assessments, well, the more expensive they get, you can get higher reliability, up to like 78% reliability. And then these problems on assessments that we have emphasized, hands-on, well, they're so expensive, they've dropped off the radar, and they are not that reliable. But why? We should be evaluating programs. And unless we think that the important things that kids learn cannot be tested, and that those important things go in the opposite direction of the things we can test, then we should be doing multiple choice tests and finding out a lot about what programs are effective. And we can do the more expensive ones, but I'm just saying. So after follow through, we have now an education system that really doesn't believe in data. We had national organizations that would not publish research studies. I submitted a research study to the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, and it was rejected with a sentence in there that said, scientific research is not, it's not a valid question to do scientific research on which curriculum design is best. And the fact is that direct instruction was the only model that emphasized curriculum and the design of instruction, and was the only thing that was effective virtually. And the design of instruction is where we should be looking for the answers. Our failed models in follow-through are still the most popular today. When we talk about education for social justice, decolonizing math, I had an article that you could read ahead of time from Australia. That's a very, very interesting, showing these same issues are here today. Child-centered versus teacher-centered instruction. Our most popular models still want to emphasize child-centered instruction. Getting that teacher-directed explicit instruction into schools is very difficult. Informal versus systematic. And individual needs versus task requirements. These are still issues today. Curriculum is not important. We just a couple years ago had in American Samoa, I was thrown out of American Samoa with the textbooks because suddenly the regional labs came down there and said nobody needs textbooks anymore, and they threw out all the textbooks, and those teachers are supposed to teach with their ratty little chalkboards and worn out mildewy materials that don't match in the classroom. Building self-esteem is still thought to be the most important thing. Child-centered instruction is said to be democratic. Teachers should create lessons on the fly, spontaneously, that planned lessons are not effective. People will say that. Individualized instruction is better. Well, anyway. And people say direct instruction, little DI, is as good as big DI, or don't make a distinction between those. The National Reading Panel even said effective instruction has these features and lists the features. And this is the same kind of reasoning as all Dalmatians have spots. So if it has spots, it's a Dalmatian. If it has these features, it will be effective. Holstein cows have spots, but they're not Dalmatians. It's not really logical just to look for the features, although, there is a science. The thing is, the engineering involved in direct instruction is so technical, it's equivalent to aeronautical engineering, if you ask me. And so as a result of follow-through, we should know constructivist practices have not worked, even achieved negative results. Little d, little I didn't work either. Now, I'm sure there are quite a bit of, there's training and there are things you can do to make little d, little I work better here and there. But only big D, big I used an engineering curriculum, scripted lessons, and was successful. was replicated, was uniformly successful across a lot of sites. Actually, one site was included in their data, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and they had stopped using the model a few years before the evaluation, but the feds would not withdraw the funds. And so because they were still getting funded, their data was included in follow through as a direct instruction model. And probably Grand Rapids, well, Gerald Ford was president then, and Grand Rapids being in Michigan, they probably didn't want to cut the funding there. But anyway, planned engineered lesson plans are sort of the direction that we know works. And you can't tell if it's effective by looking at it. You need tryout data and you need evaluation study data. We don't write direct instruction programs and say, here, it's wonderful. We do field tests. We look at the data from student performance. We revise it based on that feedback. You just don't know it's effective by looking at it. And so now today, our big theme is we need education for social justice. And they are using social justice as a banner for promoting constructivist practices. Again, equitable and engaging teaching involves using open and engaging tasks. And decolonizing math is a big movement, and I made that article, Decolonizing Math is Rooted in a Decades-Old Conflict, available to you by Greg Ashman in March of this year. Very insightful article from our Aussie colleague down under. And this is from Bill Sowers this summer. A scientifically proved vaccine for the education epidemic of inequality was denied to teachers in Project Follow Through. It was denied to the world, probably. And we have a vaccine. We could develop other vaccines. We know just because one vaccine works and is effective doesn't mean there's not a possible other vaccine that could be developed. So today we covered these topics, and we'll take some more questions from the field.
Yeah. We have one here. It's when asked why DI is not widely used today and explaining the pushback from the educational establishment, I've been told I'm essentially making up a conspiracy theory. How would you respond to that? I mean, if the first time I heard about Project Follow Through, honestly, it was many years ago, and Zig Engelman was explaining it to me, and my jaw dropped. It's like, how this is impossible. Is it true? So how do you respond when people do say this is what we're talking about now is a conspiracy theory?
I know people have said that to me. It's hard. It's hard to respond because we do have conspiracy theories that we don't want to endorse, and we don't even. But all I can say is it's true, and the evidence is in. You can Google it. Of course, you can Google all kinds of nonsense, but the data are there. The story happened. The witnesses are still alive, though they're dying off, many of them.
Yeah. So a question would be, another follow-up to this is, in your opinion, Bonnie, if the DI students in follow-through who made significant gains had been white and middle class, do you think the results would have similarly been dismissed and rejected?
Now there's a good question.
A little loaded, but what the heck? You're out on the limb already.
No, I think they would have been, because those educators sponsoring those models were so convinced that they were going to be more effective, and that they're so convinced that they're better than anything else, that it wouldn't have mattered to them. They want their model to be proven as effective, and it wasn't. It's true. They actually didn't. It turned out that when the first round of evaluation came out, that when the results were not sort of what they might have predicted or wanted to see,
they actually gave more money to
Yes.
the models that were not as successful.
Right, that's right. I omitted to say that as a result of of the Glass House report, the critique, and you have to remember that this was the purpose of this was to fund compensatory education, and they didn't find any big justification for getting more funds for compensatory education, but they did get more funds for the models that failed to try to find ways to make them successful. So the failed models got more funding, and DI was stuck at the same level because it was already effective. And when they did their later research, the goal being to find ways to make their models effective.
Yeah, yeah. It's they actually they sort of shifted the purpose in saying that these programs were, well, there was such variation between sites that
Right.
we don't want to, we can't say any one thing worked very well because DI did not work uniformly well throughout all of the different site locations.
Well, it was pretty uniform except for Grand Rapids. I mean, there's that letter that you'll have on the Nifty website from
Ernest Boyer.
Saying that we know the DI model was consistent, pretty consistent. They looked at all of them together. They didn't, because the models failed so miserably, they tried not to name them. They looked at them all together and tried to make these general principles the emphasis, like focusing on self-esteem doesn't work. You need to focus on academics, and nothing was very, yes, of all those models, they weren't very consistent in their effectiveness. They had great variability in most of the models, except DI had less variability.
Yeah.
They had that Grand Rapids site in there, which was a little far.
So another question. So one of our participants says, so if I'm to understand this correctly, certain people were biased against DI or the scientific approach, and therefore we have bias in our school system and are not using what is best for the student. The comment is, it sounds like people just want to believe that it doesn't work rather than actually seeing it for what it is. What is the best for the student? And
very good comment. There's a nice comment. Thank you.
Yes, I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah.
I remember once Carl Breiter, one of the earlier developers who worked with Zig on developing the DI model, he did a keynote and he scratched his head and he said, sometimes it appears that people just want to wring their hands and say the problem is insolvable. And that does definitely shine through in the reaction to the follow-through results.
Yes, definitely. I mean, those are, and the conscientious blindness that Bill Sowers talks about, those are things it's kind of beyond my pay grade to evaluate the psychology of all our colleagues and why they don't accept something that works. I know it's helpful to see it in front of your eyes, which is how I became convinced, seeing those Indian children in first grade learn the first time I used DI. It's like, oh my God, I was a smart teacher, but these kids didn't learn to read till I started doing it. It's like, this is so amazing, this program. And then something I've used even working in the field in California, where teachers, well, not anywhere, teachers will be resistant, but in California, I got the idea to bring in real kids while we're training and sit them down. Even I got really brazen and brought in kids that never had DI before and sat them down, and we'd do like a lesson day 1 and another lesson day 2, and they'd start learning and participating. Even in Mission High School in San Francisco, we did that with the PE class. They call Mission High School the feeder school to San Quentin, probably in those days.
Sure.
But the change in the behavior of those kids was just so persuasive for teachers. And then you get them to do it in their classroom and see the change in front of their eyes. It's the only way I know to approach the problem, because people are going to say it's conspiracy and and they're going to say all kinds of things. It just seems.
Yeah. So we don't want to get you really wound up on this one, and I could get wound up on it myself, but an attendee asks, why is DI such a political topic, almost taboo in education? And when we say political, of course, it frustrates me. I'll just jump in with this. Political, it doesn't have to do necessarily with right or left. We're not talking Republican, Democrat, but just the politics of it in that definition. So would you care to respond to that?
Well, I think it is a bit political in that the progressive education, the constructivists, and all of these naturalistic approaches are born out of a liberal philosophy that children should be able to make their choices. The thing is, when you're in high school, that's when you need to make choice. As you get older, you need to make choices. Of course, you need to make choices, but we in DI believe that children are better able to make choices if they have the tool skills, and we don't believe children should have the choice to decide to fail. And we can help them have all those tools they need so that they can make better choices. And we are actually liberals. I know we have a lot of right-leaning friends that hang on to us, which is probably one reason the liberals don't like us. It does get to be political. But the fact is that direct instruction has very progressive outcomes. And the models that are, in terms of creating racial equality, low-income kids can do as well as middle-class kids with DI. And let's see, I forgot my train of thought. The progressive models have anti-progressive outcomes with their natural and authentic. Their theory is kids will be able to make choices and have more of a, that education will be more democratic. But in fact, they're not. They're locked into their ignorance and their poverty and imprison those methods.
But ironically, when we talk about it being either right or left, some of the things since follow through that have had the greatest hope for changing the educational system. One of them was reading first.
Yes, No Child Left Behind.
Yes, and but actually prior to that, let's go to a Democratic initiative. Democratic initiative was the Comprehensive School Reform Demonstration Project. Much money given to different educational models in support. And that was the Democrats thought, well, this is a good thing. Then under the Clinton administration, then the Republican administration under Bush introduces No Child Left Behind. Everybody says, oh, at least in the DI camp, said this is a great opportunity. And that was a terrible thing. And then the following initiative after that, which I can't now. It's failing me. I'm sorry. That one was.
Well, the reading first was part of No Child Left Behind. Mm-hmm. Yes, that was sponsored during the Bush administration. But as Reed Lyon, who is the director of the National Institutes of Health and one of the main speakers for No Child Left Behind, would say he was a Democrat. A joke he would tell is that they trained their dog to when they asked the dog, "Are you a Republican?" The dog would roll over and play dead and put his feet in the air. Some joke like that. But anyway, he was a Democrat. But they were helping the No Child Left Behind and Reading First initiative get established and built, and our University of Oregon colleagues were there too. Our liberal University of Oregon people were helping get No Child Left Behind set up. And the evaluation, it found that No Child Left Behind did not have results. But I know, working in California, that all those schools that there was a huge difference made in California if you looked at the change in schools categories over the 6 or 7 years. And the evaluation there used comparison schools, just like follow through and No Child Left Behind. But the comparison schools came from the same districts. Again, there was less money. So like 1 or 2 schools would get the money and the other schools didn't. But what districts did with No Child Left Behind is they implemented with the whole district. So the comparison school in the district was doing the same thing that the No Child Left Behind school was doing, because they didn't want to have everybody doing different things. Generally, that was the pattern. They all did the same thing. So you're just comparing whether schools that got funding did better than schools that didn't get funding. They were all doing the same thing, and that's not really an evaluation of the instructional model.
True. One of our attendees has a quote from Clay Shirky in response to this. It says, institutions will try to preserve the problem to which they are the solution.
Ah, that's very insightful. That's
Yes.
that's probably what we face.
Sadly.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the field?
Well, it took medicine a long time, I guess, to stop doing bleeding and using leeches. I hope we can get to that point in education sometime.
Indeed.
I was hoping it would be before I die, but I'm getting old. I don't know if we're going to get there, but hope springs eternal.
Yeah. Well, I think that wraps up our questions segment. If
there's a lot of more information on the Nifty website about follow through.
yeah,
I really think the Bill Sowers webinar is interested. It has a lot of information about Project Follow Through.
yes, we'll make sure to send the link. I want to thank you, Bonnie, for your presentation today. It has been informative, and I want to remind people that we will be sending you an evaluation link. We'd appreciate your information, your feedback on this webinar, as well as any additional questions. We'll follow up with that. And also, we will send you a link, Bonnie referenced a few times, to a keynote presentation that our colleague and good friend Bill Sauer presented back in July. It was intended pre-COVID to be a keynote delivered at our National Direct Instruction Conference. Unfortunately, circumstances were such that he wasn't able to do it as a live presentation in Eugene, but it is a video presentation that I think our viewers will find it quite illuminating. It is available at our website under our conference keynotes, but I'll directly send you that link along with. We will be sending you the link to this recording, as well as a version of the PowerPoint presentation that Bonnie has been working from. The National Institute for Direct Instruction stands ready to serve you in any way that we possibly can. We are the go-to place to find out additional information on training, program selection, and really all things DI. So please go to our website and check us out at www.nifdi.org. We have a great wealth of information that we're just absolutely thrilled to share. So check that out. And so all of that said, again, thank you all for your time in attending this presentation. I hope you have found it useful and informative. And I wish you all a very good day, and thank you for your time and attention.
Yeah, I see Bill Sowers is on here too. Thank you, Bill, for attending.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, you all have a good day. Everybody now, go wash your hands and be safe, be healthy, and go out there and do good things in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you.